Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Logistics Lager Lounge. And our guest today is Richard Barrett. Thanks for joining us today, Richard.
Nice to see you, Dave. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. I wonder if you could start by telling us how your career has evolved over the years.
Yeah, sure. So it's been a kind of crazy journey, really. The real kind of root of it was at university. I studied economics and finance, and I wanted to be a banker, but I graduated in 2008, and being a banker in 2008 was like, well, it wasn't not an option, but it was a much more difficult option than it might have been usually. So
Yes.
I fell back on building websites, just freelance. And, I did all right. I had a few clients around the local area where I was at the time in Southampton, and some clients up in London, some clients where I was originally from in Essex. And somebody I met through that was Nav, who you know, and Parcel Monkey wasn't the initial thing. There were some other schemes and projects before, but we ended up starting this business, Parcel Monkey, that evolved from essentially a bedroom startup. We used to literally meet in the pub because we didn't have an office. Which is apt for this. And then it just grew from there. I think we did just shy of £1 million turnover in our first year, and I think 3 in the second, and it kind of just grew and grew and grew. And obviously, once I was in, then the other kind of opportunities weren't interesting to me. So we built the business from a startup through to a much more kind of sizable business. Along the way, we started some other bits and pieces like Cloud Fulfillment, our third-party logistics business, and eTrack, our cross-border logistics business for larger retailers. And eventually, we ended up selling all 3 of them. Very close to each other, actually. We sold eTrack to the delivery group, and Parcel to Go bought Parcel Monkey and Cloud Fulfillment. So it was very much kind of startup journey. That's the kind of condensed version of the story. And nowadays, obviously, it's developed beyond there. So no longer kind of am part of the founding team of the business that owns Parcel Monkey, and it's been a journey evolving it and migrating it into Parcel to Go from a people perspective, from a tech perspective, ops and everything else. Obviously, being competitors for so long, it's not been necessarily straightforward to figure out how it kind of fits as part of the broader thing. But yeah, in a nutshell, started something with nothing really to lose and no idea how it would turn out, and ended up here 16 years later.
Amazing.
So
amazing.
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple of questions about that, Rich? You said before you got into Parcel Monkey, you was creating and setting up websites. Now, obviously, I couldn't create a website to this day, but when you look on the internet, you got with AI, it can be done in 2 minutes, etc. But how hard was it then to create a website? Was it really super difficult? Or was it not as difficult as people like me might have thought it was?
I think it depends what you're trying to create, right? I mean, the tech has evolved massively in those kind of 15, 16 years. Fundamentally, the underlying technology is the same. The internet is the same as it was then. It's just that we have much more available to us now in terms of technology, loads of different stacks and things like that. I mean, I suppose fundamentally, it was probably easier back then in some ways because the people's expectation was lower. Like nowadays, if you go to build an e-com website or you go to build a new web application for businesses, you're expected to use these quite complex frameworks, quite complex technologies to build something that works on all these different devices and stuff like that. Back in 2010, people just wanted a website that looked all right on a computer and worked in Internet Explorer 6 or whatever, So I would say that it's different. Some of it's easier, some of it's harder. The actual building of a website is harder, but then, as you rightly said, there are tools now like the AI tools which are making it easier again. But then other parts of it are a lot easier than it was then. The actual infrastructure piece, you can spin up a server in 2 minutes with a click now, whereas in the old days, you'd have to ring up a server company, pay them a load of money and wait 2 weeks for them to plug it in. So yeah, bit of a mixture.
And also at the same time, I thought the same sort of very similar time. He said when Parcel Monkey set up, were people like consumers like me, or the carriers ready for what you were doing? Because what you did then seems pretty normal now, but at the time, I imagine it was quite unusual, both for consumers to a degree, but certainly for the carriers and to understand what you do, and also you've got to start from zero to build critical mass. So it's that leap of faith by everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, with the final point, the leap of faith thing. I mean, in all honesty, our strategy for that was basically to blue-faced lie about our volumes at the start to try and get some accounts and some reasonable rates that we could resell. You're absolutely right. Back then, the carriers, it's always been the same to some extent, but they kind of loved us and either loved us or they hated us. And they didn't like the fact that they felt that we were essentially making a buck off of their efforts. But they loved the fact that we bought a load of volume to them and paid our bill every week. So our value proposition back then was slightly different. Nowadays, you can kind of go to the carriers directly and buy a parcel. Back then, you couldn't. You had to have a sales rep come round. They had to, verify your volume, that you had to guarantee them 500 quid a week or whatever the threshold was. And loads of small businesses couldn't do that. So what we did. We mocked all that up, and that was our kind of story to the carriers as to why we should exist. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That value proposition has diminished over time, and to react to that, we've ended up kind of shifting towards where we can add value beyond the delivery. So it's things like offering a really good customer service experience to small businesses and consumers, offering things like protection cover for covering losses and damages, tooling, so making it easier for businesses to generate their shipping labels and get things out the door. So the value prop has very much changed from you can get a cheap shipping label from us to you can get a shipping label, but actually we bring all these other things to the table as well.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and sort of going, following right through to now, because obviously you've been working with the parcel companies and watching them both in the UK and around Europe and America, as you mentioned. If you're looking at it right now, what would you say the biggest challenges are to the logistics sector right now?
I mean, I think there's always been a challenge with margin. I think that's always been the case. As long as I have been in this game, there has been challenges with margin. It's a race to the bottom often. Large shippers put pressure on carriers to slash margins to win the business. So I think margins are kind of ever existing challenge. I think more topical and recent, tariffs is the one that stands out to me. We obviously had Brexit, and then we've got all this kind of Trump tariff stuff going on at the moment. That makes things significantly harder for logistics businesses. Obviously, they have to actually deal with getting this stuff through customs and across borders and somehow facilitate the money flow back and forth. And the other not so much hidden, but perhaps not obvious consequence of all this is that the volume is challenged, right? Like people who used to ship to, say, the US are just not shipping now because it's either too difficult or they feel like their product would be too expensive once it gets in market. So yeah, I think two things: tariffs and margins. That stands out to me. I think it's not really my area of things, but there's also a lot of talk about skill gaps and shortages in people like HGV drivers and stuff like that. But that's slightly outside of the scope of what my little slice of logistics is.
No, I really appreciate that. And do you think, because obviously recently we've had FedEx getting together with InPost and or potentially getting together, do you think consolidation will continue in the sector?
I think yes is the short answer. I think particularly in the out-of-home sector. So I think the key challenge there is real estate. So at the moment, you've got people like InPost, Every, Amazon, and a few others that are all kind of vying for space to stick these lockers. And realistically, well, first of all, that the cost involved in actually building and installing these lockers is really high. Finding the physical place to put them is going to become ever more challenging, whereas all these operators try and compete with each other. So a logical solution to that is consolidation. If people work together, they can share infrastructure as opposed to having to invest and build a kind of replica of somebody else's. I think the FedEx thing is interesting because FedEx, they have a presence in like the UK and Europe, obviously, but they're not as strong as they are in their kind of prime territory in the US. So I think they've put a big bet on the table there and said, look, we're going to buy our way into this market in the area that we think has the biggest potential to grow. And I think a lot of people would be hard pushed to disagree that out of home is the area of growth. So in short, I think consolidation will continue to happen. I think it's kind of needed in the industry. I mean, getting back to the margin point, when you've got more players, there's more competition, it drives the prices down. When there's fewer players, the market tends to lift because everybody's kind of not competing as strongly with one another. I think consolidation will continue.
And also, do you consider it consolidation or cooperation? Because if you look at the lockers, some networks work on open locker, like Quadian, and you work on open locker networks that other people can utilize, where some are closed, like Impost are. So it may be there'll be some strategic changes in those as well.
It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, the people that are investing in the infrastructure, they want to sweat that asset. And the people that aren't investing in infrastructure want access to such an infrastructure. So you can see that there's a logical partnership there. I think it's tricky when a lot of these businesses so fiercely compete with each other. I mean, look at the UK. You've got like Every and Impost, who are probably the two locker candidates. I know there's plenty of others, but those are the two that kind of stand out to me. But Impost own Yodel, who's been Every's arch enemy for some time. So I think I think you're right. I think there will be collaboration. And I really love the model of carrier agnostic lockers, the kind of Quadient model. I think that's clever. But I don't know what shape or what form that's going to take.
Well, I think pretty much everyone in logistics are in the same situation. If we knew the future, we could be investing our money and making lots of money, like anything in life, isn't it?
Exactly.
If we all knew 3 or 4 years ago what the gold price is, we would have invested in gold, wouldn't we? And it goes, it goes up and down like everything. And during your career, has there been a major key influence on you or a mentor that's been around you?
I think for me, my kind of philosophy on life and relationships with people is that I try and take something from everybody. Like, you observe people and you like some things about them and you dislike other things about them. That's just human. And you try and cherry pick the stuff that to add to your to do or to not do list, if you like. Obviously, you're influenced the most by the people around you. And I think, especially early in my career, I definitely needed some kind of influencing. I was very risk averse. I'm quite an analytical person, and I tend to rationalize things a lot. And I think I'm probably guilty some time ago of being able to talk myself out of an opportunity because of the risk. And obviously, early on in my career, I met Nav and worked with Nav for 15 plus years. He is probably the polar opposite of that. He doesn't see risk, or he doesn't rationalize things. He very much works on a kind of gut instinct, and is a risk taker. So that was probably a good influence for me at the beginning of my career, because it dialed down my risk aversion a little bit. I think more broadly than that, I try and kind of pull from businesses and people that I admire. So I really kind of like businesses. It's not my kind of area, but Gymshark, I love the way that business operates and has grown. I love how kind of customer obsessed they are. And I think a common trait among successful businesses is customer obsession. I really like Apple, the geek in me. I've always loved Apple as a business since I was very young. And I kind of grew up through that era of like Jonathan Ive, the principal designer there, when he released the iPod, and then all the kind of the aluminium Macs and all that kind of stuff. And I really admired the kind of the concept that it's much harder to make things simpler than it is to make it more complicated. And I think, from my perspective, building software, that's been a key influence for me. I like things that have got less buttons and are simpler, but do the function well, as opposed to things that are kind of endlessly configurable. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's kind of specific individuals or mentors as such, but as I say, my philosophy is very much trying to cherry pick and kind of observe and implement things that you gain from people throughout your career.
Yeah, so you've said some sort of close by influencers, like I think it was Nav Ramaya you were talking about. You mentioned
yes.
Nav, and also influencers from afar, like you talked about what Apple have done. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And
I genuinely do. I genuinely do think you can take something from everybody. I think. I've obviously worked with hundreds or thousands of people probably over the course of my career, and it's interesting where you can cherry pick great little habits or traits from people that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily expect. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, Rich. Well, look, I just want to say cheers. Thank you for doing that for us, and I'm sure our viewers will enjoy it. Thanks very much.